CTTB. Music Podcast.
Modern technology.
It's amazing. We've been doing this all these years.
Yeah.
So we had to go with it. Anyway, hello.
Hello again.
Ah.
This is almost like the olden days when it's kind of like a month since we last did it, and it's almost like we're doing it monthly again. My God. Hello, listeners. Podcast 3, and we have 5 albums again this time around. MGMT, Loss of Life. Cherym. No, I looked up how to say this,
Cherym.
and then I forgot. Yeah,
Cherym?
Take It or Leave It.
Okay.
Talk show Effigy. Chelsea Wolfe. She reaches out to she. Okay. Declan McKenna. What happened to the beach? Absolutely. So we start off with MGMT.
The big questions tonight.
Yeah. 5th album from MGMT. We actually reviewed their 2nd album, Celebration, back on podcast 6, 2010.
Oh, vintage.
I think we were children back then, weren't we?
God. I mean, no, speaking of, I didn't have a child at that point. Grief.
Yeah.
Wow. She's practically 13.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
Podcast 6, 2010.
Wow.
Oddly enough, I haven't looked up what we said because, yeah.
Oh, my word.
Anyway, that's their 2nd album.
That's it, folks. Good night.
So their 2nd album was 14 years ago, and it's their 5th album.
Oh, wow.
So the management, as the abbreviation came about because the band had already got the name The Management, so they're back, Pete.
Right.
Do we care?
It's funny because you mentioned, obviously, and I always think of MGMT as that band around that sort of late noise, early 2010s period. I think I've spoken about this on the podcast before. There's a hole I fall into around then.
Yeah.
Probably because I was trying to have a kid. And MGMT is sort of there, but not there for me in my musical journey through the 21st century. So to go back to this now is actually a little bit nostalgic for a band that I didn't really know the first time around, but I'm conscious that many people did. So is it worth it? It does feel like a return to somewhere. Maybe a better time, maybe a calmer time, maybe a more innocent time. That sort of flavour of psychedelic pop that was very much around at that time. There were other bands that sort of perhaps on the more alternative scene, you know. And I'm thinking of the likes of, we saw them Giant Ball floating around the arena. Yes, thank you. Oh, as if I'm cute.
Yeah, my mind has also gone blank.
Yes. So, moving swiftly on, but a greater subtlety and, dare I say, maturity, perhaps, to the sound.
Flaming Lips.
Thank you, Flaming Lips, than there was previously. And I'm thinking about the tracks on this album, it's very much, I do very much appreciate the sort of Loss of Life Part 2, which is where we open, the sort of Pink Floyd-esque sort of list of spoken word observances. And death, obviously, a theme as well, which ties us very much back to Dark Side of the Moon.
Yep.
And then we move into 3 very strong opening tracks with Mother Nature, Dancing in Babylon, with Christine and the Queens,
Absolutely.
and People in the Streets. And actually across those 3, the very strong 80s melodic pop vibe to People and to Dancing in Babylon in particular, a very attractive, fabulous piano riff in there as well, which is marvellous. Also liked tracks further on, like Nothing Changes, I Wish I Was Joking, and Loss of Life, presumably Loss of Life Part 1.
Well, yes.
Which is how it closes the album. I do like, I think it's Scary Monsters. David Bowie obviously does the whole Part 1, Part 2 opening and closing trick. And having been through my Bowie Odyssey recently, I've quite appreciated that as well.
Yeah, it is weird. Obviously, you said the opening bit, Lost Life Part 2, which is a collection of spoken word stuff, which is, it's basically a poem. So it's a 13th century poem called Taliesin.
Well, now Excellent.
which bizarrely I recognised and knew, but only because when I went to university in Swansea, and our theatre was called Taliesin. After this particular piece of medieval literature. So that kind of starting off, maybe going to go, what the fuck? It's like, all right, fine. And you said then it kind of like sweeps into a really impressive opening few tracks, as you've said.
Absolutely.
I mean, Dancing in Babylon is a really great tune. And pure 80s, I thought. It reminded me a lot. In fact, there's a couple of songs in the album that reminded me of the Hooters, the band The Hooters. Also with a bit of kind of Cyndi Lauper thrown in, strangely enough, with the way that Christine comes in. And then, as you said, the thing that had me perplexed for the longest time on this track was I kept sitting there going, "This reminds me of something."
And what did you
remind you of? Yes, and it reminded me of something that I wrote, which has to be the first ever. It's like, and I was literally kind of going through all the kind of bands that I knew, going, "There's that piano thing," and it's just really kind of. It's really reminiscent of something. What was it? And then I was literally lying in bed like 2 nights ago, and I went, "No, what it is?
Yeah.
It's literally something I wrote about 12 years ago."
Go back to people listening. Go back to 2011's. Is it Pessimism by Land?
Yes,
on SoundCloud.
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
It's only brief, but yes, it did make me laugh.
There is an echo.
Yeah. As you say, then there's you mentioned Nothing Changes, which again. Couldn't find out who did the female backing vocals on that, but that was also a good song. The Bubblegum songs also remind me almost of kind of like Bowie T-Rex kind of vibe to it, kind of going on. But I have to confess, and I might say this again during the podcast, my interest waned a bit towards the end.
Yes,
not because the songs were rubbish per se, but just because it just kind of fell away a bit.
I sagged in. I came back at the end. I sagged mostly in the middle, but I came back at the end a little bit. But yeah, even 2 or 3 lessons in, I was struggling. Yeah,
better at the start. Moving on to Cherym, Take It or Leave It, debut album from this Derry Londonderry band, who I first came across in 2021 with their single Listening to My Head, which is perhaps understandably not featured on this album, but because of its fact that it's 3 years old. But it's an absolutely cracking track, and you really should check it out. It's excellent. And that another song that was out at a similar time called Kisses on My Cards, I heard and kind of thought, have a quite good ear for a melody, this little band. I thought, interesting. So I was pleased when the debut album came out. It's 30 minutes long, as it should be for kind of a, pop rock punk album.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this was immensely enjoyable, it has to be said. You've got songs about toxic masculinity on Alpha, Beta, Sigma, pronouns brilliantly on the thing about them, not being sporty but fancying someone who plays sport, taking up sports, toxic relationships generally, on colourblind, different treatments of boys and girls. It's very, very well constructed pop punk songs, and including at the end, the final song at the end is one of those. It is a kind of sing along crowd pleaser kind of thing that most emo punk bands or even Avril Lavigne would be quite happy with. It's not me, it's you kind of thing. That has some woes, and we like a woe. In fact,
whoa.
And in fact, come this Friday at a whole city gig, we may be woeing.
Whoa.
And this is a record that just made me smile and tap my foot. And what more could you want at this time of the year? Enjoy.
It was very enjoyable. Always a soft spot for Derry Londonderry. Having spent some time there, it's that sort of pop driven rock. You mentioned Avril Lavigne. I didn't actually write Avril Lavigne because I thought it was too obvious, but I did actually write Skater Rock later on because I think actually towards the end of the album it settles into a more traditional, more sort of.
I know what you mean. Yes,
mainstream sort of idea of what Skater Rock is. I actually think the first half of the album is stronger because it feels more individual, and the lyrics are obviously a lot much more on point as well. It's very smartly done. You've actually listed the 3 tracks I was going to list, so I'm not going to go over that much more. Did love the fact that protagonist on the thing about them is obviously speaking with the local accent, and the antagonist is speaking with this posh English accent.
Yes.
Which just made me smile so much. It was hilarious. So yeah. No, it's really good album. I mean, it's a really good pop rock album.
And if the band are listening, which they won't be, I bought it on vinyl.
Hey, good on you.
Yeah. You know, why not? Moving on to another debut album from a South London band called Talk Show. It's called Effigy. Another album, obviously the last album was 30 minutes. This is clocks in at 31 minutes. Right. South London, Talk Show, Peter.
Say something nice. A real bizarre mix, this, of 2000s electro clash and the spoken word. And it took me a while to sort of, it's really obvious. That's like, it's talk show. It's a spoken word album. Of course it is. But it took me 2 or 3 tracks to sort of realise that. And it's definitely an inventive record. It's there, it's out there. But for me, I found it a little challenging. Again, I think we've been here before with albums like this, where the second half feels better because you've kind of got used to the cadence. You've kind of got used to the sort of the flow of the album. So I think I sort of did get more into it.
Yeah, so I thought the first half was strong.
Nah. So tracks for me, like I did like Red White.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, first half. Got Sold, Panic. For me, the strongest track, unfortunately or fortunately, look at it, was the last track, which, in my opinion, I think that's where it all sort of came together. So Catalonia being the last track.
Yeah.
It's where the vocals and the electronic was suddenly meshed in a way that I felt was kind of, the album was leaning towards that sort of meshing happening, but it never quite. And do you know what? When you think about some of the things I do like Depeche Mode, your dark electro pop, I should have liked this more, but I didn't.
I thought you would like it more, strangely. It's interesting. I thought it was a bit like Tricky meets Nin with a bit of the Prodigy, and also probably a bit of New Model Army, bizarrely kind
Shades
of thrown,
of Nin. I'll come back to that. And I heard Shades of Prodigy as well, but I didn't quite cling.
Yeah, so I thought it started off strong. So I really liked Gold and Red White as an opening twosome, as it were. I thought, I'm going to like this. But then bizarrely, whilst you are right, it is inventive, it ended up feeling still bizarrely a bit samey and feeling much longer than its 31 minutes. Although I really liked Oh You're All Mine, which I think is kind of in the middle of the album. Somewhere. So again, I kind of thought it was another one of those records that kind of fell away a bit for me, rather than got better.
I really like Catalonia.
Yeah, it didn't.
Definitely. So that's where I sort of bought in.
Yeah, didn't really do much for me, that.
Yeah.
The moment I liked about Catalonia was the fact that the album actually was the fact that on the way I got this set up, it started playing Gold again.
Yeah.
Straight after it finished, it's like, I like Gold.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. 3 down, 2 to go. We've got Chelsea Wolfe. She reaches out to She. 7th studio album by the American. We reviewed her 4th album, Abyss, on podcast 8 2015.
Wow. Which I didn't realise.
I know. I think so. That this is also one that has, to get the start, some serious Nin tendencies.
I'll go further than that. But
yes, yeah. It opens with Whispers in the Echo Chamber, which is, I recommend anyone that wants to listen to the album of playing this as loud as you can in a room with as good a speakers as you can, because it is, in fact, that and the closing track, which is Dusk, isn't it? Both of which are guitar heavy, whereas most of the album is not guitar heavy. Just marvellous, played loud, frankly. And because the guitar riffage at the end of the opening track is just like, great, and sets up the kind of next track, which is, and it's bizarrely, which goes at a frenetic pace, House of Self-Undoing. But then bizarrely, the album just like slows right down after that. It's like, okay, we've gone the,
yeah.
Now we're just going to go and relax. And she has a vocal style that goes from kind of ethereal to almost lost in the mix and the music, unless you're paying attention to it, to then being quite upfront. So there's a couple of tracks, Everything Turns Blue particularly, where it's very much forward in the mix. And I was thinking on this track and a couple of other tracks that it was reminding me a bit of Bat for Lashes. And you could almost imagine Natasha Khan doing this kind of record if she decided she wanted to take a Nine Inch Nails approach to kind of making an album kind of thing. Obviously, hints of Halsey through the Nin thing that we've done before. Yeah. Liminal, that's in the middle of the album, one of my favourite tracks on the album. I think it's just absolute belting track. As I said, I enjoyed the fact that the album kind of it's bookended by two songs that end in proper guitars. So the opening track and the final track have got proper guitars going on. It's quite an intense listening experience. But I have to say, I've probably played this album more than any of the other albums on the podcast. But what's weird is I'm still not quite sure how much I like it. So I like it. I might possibly love it. But again, I'm not sure. But I do know I'm going to listen to it again.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I found there was a bit in it that's a bit kind of Massive Attack-y, particularly when you think of Massive Attack when they worked with Elizabeth Fraser on Teardrops and stuff. There's a couple of tracks in the latter half of the album that are reminiscent of that, and also of the band Ruby from the early 90s as well. But yeah, I was leaning towards liking this album a lot.
It's funny what you say about liking it and potentially loving it, because I really liked it on the first listen. On the second listen, I thought, maybe I didn't like it so much. And then on the third listen, I liked it a lot more.
I think it might be one of those ones that it's almost kind of mood based, and you have to be in the right frame of mind.
I will, and it's one of those albums. I say this, it's a cliche to say this on the podcast, but I will listen to it again. For me, I often wonder where the sort of modern day legacy of Trent Reznor comes through, and particularly the sort of latter day stuff he does with the soundtracks and Atticus Ross. And maybe I'm looking in the wrong places, but I never really hear bands that sound like they've got some sort of connection to the sort of work that he's put into the ecosystem. Maybe I'm in the wrong places, but it definitely comes through on this album. You mentioned, what was it? Is it the track Everything Turns Blue?
Yeah.
I posit possibly even the deepest shade of mushroom blue. I love it. Yeah, it's really good. Amongst all those influences, you mentioned Massive Attack. I thought of Portishead.
I see that.
It's sort of pulling from the same thread there, I think. And it's obvious to say things like Tori Amos and possibly even St. Vincent. I even got strong Depeche Mode vibes. I think it's the track Eyes Like Nightshade.
Okay.
I got very strong Depeche Mode vibes there. So
I hadn't thought that, but I can see where you're coming from.
Absolutely. And I also like, it's not quite dusk, it's the track before dusk, it's Place in the Sun. Those closing synths that go do, 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 do.
Yeah.
I love that stuff. So yes, for me, this is a definite returning to album. And I can't remember what I said about her in 2015, but I'm probably saying wildly different things there.
I think we were both positive about it. I don't think we were raved about it, but I think we were both positive about the album.
I'll go as far as to say, actually looked up when she's playing live, and she's got a couple of gigs. She's got a gig in April, and she's coming back to London in October. I'm sorely tempted by that.
Well, if we can't get tickets to Casey Musgraves, then
it's money saved.
The ideal replacement gig, frankly.
Exactly.
So we end with Declan McKenna, What Happened to the Beach, third album from the English singer-songwriter.
Got covered in shit by this Tory government.
Yes. I was going to say, before you speak, I was a big fan of his second album, 2022's Zeros.
Yeah.
So I was looking forward to this album, but before I say what I think, Pete, what did you think?
It's a quirky pop album. It's the first thing I wrote. So I actually wrote, it's a quirky pop album of songs from a gap year. I don't know what I mean by that. I think I know where I'm going with that. It's very entertaining lyrically, covers quite a number of styles musically. But for me, where this album lands, it's got hints of Britpop, but more for me, it's got hints of real 60s and even 70s pop.
Yeah,
There's one track in particular, quite early on, Sympathy. I was listening to Sympathy. It could very well be a George Harrison solo track from his sort of mid to late 70s, specifically from his mid to late 70s period. And I think for me, that sort of nailed it in terms of, I get it. It's that sort of influence. It's not Beatles influence, but it's that influence of sort of
that is one of the best tracks in the album.
Yeah, pop music from around that time. And I mean, Nothing Works is clearly a hit, or wants to be a hit. The Phantom Buzz kicks in, maybe also. On second and third listen, I really got into tracks later on in the album, like Honest Test and It's an Act, which is the slow sort of, not quite the closer, but it feels like it should be the closer. On first listen, tracks like Mulholland's Dinner and Wine, it has that sort of weary British pop music. I almost say Pet Shop Boys, not quite, but that sort of sense of it. It's a song that feels like it's recalling a boring sequence of events, but actually it's done very well. Yeah, so it's got its roots in very much 60s, 70s, maybe even 80s pop, but through this sort of lens of something that's slightly different, slightly out there.
Yeah, I mean, I loved the album previous to this. I have to confess being a bit underwhelmed by this.
It's more lessons.
It's definitely more spacey and laid back than the previous albums, specifically in the first half. Clearly been influenced by his move to West Coast of America, and it's less political as well than the previous two albums. In fact, the vibe on the first half of the album, it occurred to me earlier on today, it's not too dissimilar from the general vibe of the MGMT album. Has that kind of same kind of thing, but because of that, it mostly had the vibe of the latter half of the MGMT album, which kind of washed over me. So it was only when on songs like Sympathy and amusingly the other two tracks you mentioned, so Phantom Buzz, because I love the distorted guitar on that, which reminded me very much of the Zeros album, and Nothing Works, which I think is possibly, along with Sympathy, the best track on the album, but did have me singing Maxine Nightingale's Right Back Where We Started From when it hit the chorus.
Yeah.
So again, one of those things they're going, yeah. Okay, what is that? And eventually it's like, oh, I know what it is. It's Right Back Where We Started From.
Yeah.
But, if you're going to kind of rip off a good tune. But then for me, it all kind of fizzled out again. So I was mildly disappointed with this record.
That's a shame.
Compared to Zeros.
Because that's where I started. I started quite disappointed, but actually it grew on me.
Yeah. So, I'm guessing I probably don't need to ask what's the album of the podcast, but I'll ask anyway, Pete.
Go on, ask me.
What's the album of the podcast, Pete?
It's Chelsea Wolfe.
It is.
By quite a long way.
It is.
She reaches out to she.
Yes. A very close second for me would be the Cherym album, but I think on creativity and just madness and for playing at loud volume, Chelsea Wolfe.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, honourable mention to Cherym, but yeah, absolutely. Agree.
So join us again next time when we will be reviewing the new album from Casey Musgraves, even if we don't get to go see it live, because tickets selling out really quickly.
Really quickly. She got them.
Yeah. And we may also review the new album by Judas Priest. I don't believe we've ever reviewed a Judas Priest album.
Kidding. No, I suppose we haven't, have we?
No.
Fair enough, yeah.
So,
give that a crack.
Judas Priest and Casey Musgraves. What more could you want in a podcast?
That's diverse.
Mm-hmm. Until then.
See you.
You've been listening to the CTB Music Podcast. The CTTB Music Podcast is a Vineland production.